Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War News Update, first part there for the 22nd of June 2024. Let's get straight to where we normally start. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course. You can find them in the description to the video below. 1,110 personnel lost is about where we have seen it for the last month or so. 8 tanks is about average. I think it's just maybe one under at the daily average. 11 armoured personnel vehicles is under the daily average. 28 artillery systems is above the daily average, but not as high as we have seen. So these are fairly depressed figures across those combat vehicle categories. 23 vehicles and fuel tanks is definitely lower than we're used to, and 2 pieces of special equipment likewise. So this is very much a lower day of losses for the Russians, although personnel is still quite high. So what does that tell us? I don't know whether things are changing on the front lines where the Russians aren't pushing so much. I'm hearing that the Russians are trying to make gains on the eastern front line while everyone's looking up at Kharkiv and thinking about that area. The Russians are continuing to make hay while the sun shines down there. So in the Prokrovsk direction. But yeah, we'll see. Now, Andrew Perpetua has his loss list here, and again it's fairly close to parity. 61 Russian vehicles, 38 Ukrainian vehicles, 33 combat assets for the Russians and 13 combat assets for the Ukrainians. So where I like to concentrate matters is looking at the combat assets, and I think that's at least better news there for the Ukrainians. Of the 33 for the Russians, we've got 24 destroyed or abandoned and 9 damaged. So that's pretty good ratio there. For the Ukrainians, for their combat assets, 6 destroyed and damaged. Destroyed and abandoned, and 7 damaged. So there's about parity there. So again, not only are the combat assets losses better for the Ukrainians, but also the proportion of destroyed against damage is better for the Ukrainians. Anyway, let's look at this list, and we'll go to the top of the Ukrainian list first. And you can see that, okay, most of those losses, well, not most of them, but there is a significant number of Starlink on there. And that will be interesting that the Russians are really evidently targeting Starlink there to try and hit the Ukrainian ability to communicate, and one would presume to operate their drones. This might be a targeted, I assume it is, and probably sensibly so. So that is significant. But in terms of combat vehicles, if you take all of them off, then the list would look somewhat different. If you think about the cost of Starlink, maybe around $1,000 or whatever, they don't compare to, say, a tank. Now, in terms of combat vehicles, we have again a number of Western vehicles on the list, a couple of Humvees and M113 Max Pros, so they're your APCs, MRAPs and whatnot. We've got 2 Bradleys, that's 100% the IFVs are Western, and with the tanks, some unknown tanks there, but the T-64 on there. And then one of those howitzers, at least one, is a Western one. So you've got Lancet still doing their thing here. Have a decoy at the bottom. Lancet claim it hit an AS-90, but Andrew says he only sees a tree getting hit. He calls that a decoy, but it's not technically a decoy. It's an inaccurate Lancet hitting a tree. And then, yeah, a bunch of civilian vehicles. So not the worst day of losses, but interesting that Bradleys keep turning up in the infantry fighting vehicle lists. They are obviously using Bradleys a lot more than they were. With the Russians, some surveillance comms equipment at the top, a lot of boats here. It seems that there's been a bit of a shift since Ukraine has pulled across from the left bank of Dnipro. They're probably not using as many boats, and we aren't seeing as many lost by the Ukrainians. They were losing lots of boats when they were at the height of their activities in Krinky. Now we see a lot of Russian boats being lost on a daily basis. Then when we look at the artillery list there, almost entirely D-30s, older howitzers from the Soviet era. There's an S2, a 2S7 Pion. That's a really big bit of kit. The Pion, that's at the top. That's been destroyed, but all the other artillery pieces damaged. I think it's quite difficult to know whether a towed piece of artillery equipment is fully destroyed, especially when hit by a drone. It's, it depends where you hit it, and there's not a lot of moving parts compared to, say, a self-propelled howitzer. Right, tanks wise, the Russians have lost quite a few here, and almost all of them destroyed or abandoned. So that means they're generally not getting them back. T90 on their T90M destroyed. That's their most modern tank. We've also got a tractor guard and shed as per usual, and then a variety of other tanks, most of them unknown. Infantry fighting vehicles, it's the usual culprits there: BMP 1s, 2s, 3s, BTR 82s. And then we move on down to armored personnel carriers. That is the second time we've seen a Patriot there. I wonder if there's a Czech Excalibur company, I think, makes an armored personnel carrier called the Patriot, and I wonder whether that is what that one is. Some trucks, golf carts, civilian vehicles, so on and so forth. So, yeah, quite a few bits of kit lost, but it's not the worst day for the Russians. Although a lot of the Ukrainian equipment is skewed by the Starlink, but that is itself a problem for the Ukrainians. Right, moving on to see what else we can see from the socials. A video of genuine evil, says Andrew Perpetua here, where and I mentioned this yesterday in one of my videos. The civilians live in this town, mostly the elderly. They are firing massive 240mm rounds with 32 kilograms of filler into their homes. These are just huge rounds slamming into Ukrainian, unfortunately, civilian territory and civilian infrastructure. That is what looks like a tulip, a 240mm self-propelled howitzer. Not howitzer, mortar. It goes up and down much more. It's much steeper, parabolic curve. That is par for the course for the Russians, isn't it? Just slamming ordnance into a town in the hope that either you kill the civilians or that they all run away. The Russian OSA air defense system here missed the observation drone, so it fired. This is another example of an air defense system trying to take out a drone that is hunting it and missing. So it fires and misses, but the FPV drone that was lurking around did not miss the Wasp. That might be what they call the OSA. Russian air defense are getting smashed, says PS01. I mean, there is a high attrition rate of Russian air defense systems, and here's another one that gets taken out by all accounts. Right, the last thing to show is something that's just happened, just on the socials right now. A Russian Pantsir S1 air defense system, so a modern piece of kit, a decent bit of kit, has reportedly been hit by the Ukraine in Dubove in Belgorod, about 26 kilometers from Ukraine, possibly using a HIMARS guided multiple launch rockets system. And this is this has been reported by an awful lot of sources, so lots of people seem to be confirming that this has actually happened. In fact, I think Aiden Squatson's on a Russian source has admitted it, but then said all the crew survived. Of course, they would probably survive if a Gimler's, if a HIMARS missile landed on top of them. Anyway, moving on to distance munitions. It's been a bit of a tough night for the Ukrainians. Air defense forces destroyed 12 Russian missiles and 13 attack drones. So quite a busy night for the Russians, or for the Ukrainians. Let's look at the stats then. 7 out of 10 KH-101 or KH-555 cruise missiles. So that's 70% of your kind of fairly standard cruise missiles. 1 out of 2 of the Iskander K cruise missiles, and not the Iskander M ballistic ones, but the Iskander K. 4 out of 4 Caliber cruise missiles. They are the easiest ones to shoot down, it appears. And 13 out of 13 Shahed drones. So all of the drones shot down. What we have are 4 missiles hitting their targets. But of course, as good as the interception rate is there, you got 4 missiles that could be slamming into a thermal power plant, and that's the end of electricity for a long time, depending on how critical that hit is. Anton Geraschenko says, yet another massive Russian missile attack on Ukraine last night. I mean, I wouldn't call it massive. It's not nearly as big as we have seen them. And that, I think, itself is a significant point to make. Russia attacked with missiles and drones targeting energy infrastructure. The facilities of the electricity transmission system operator in the southern and western regions of Ukraine were under attack. 2 employees were injured. Equipment has been damaged. Also, during the attack, an overhead power line was disconnected in the eastern region, which led to a decrease in the load on the generating facility. Consequences of that are still unclear. Educational facilities and homes were damaged as well. I think 3 educational facilities were hit, possibly. But anyway, the approximate route of the drones and missiles during the Russian attack last night. So we had a number of missiles coming down from the north in what looks like from Bryansk Oblast is that, coming down into past Chernihiv and then onto areas in the west. I'm trying to work out whether Staro-Konstantinov was here. I don't think it was. I think this is more your probably your energy infrastructure in the west of the country. So we know that Lviv was targeted. It looks like Lutsk as well, and then further down here in Chernivtsi, nearer to the Hungarian border there. And then we drones, I think, going up into similar position. And we also have a missile coming up to hit Zaporizhia from Crimea area, and other ones from across, possibly from Crimea, who knows where from the Black Sea, coming up and into Ukraine there. So what else do we have? Goodness me, that's so annoying when Twitter does this. Why do you do that? Okay, there were also attacks on infrastructure in Vinnytsia and in Lviv, as mentioned, where there was also a fire. That fire looks pretty significant in Lviv. So the videos from the energy facility attacked there, that is just that one assuming that's, say, one missile hitting that energy piece of energy infrastructure, that could be catastrophic, right? Every missile that gets through for the Russians is a real challenge to Ukraine in a really significant manner. The energy infrastructure is so fragile at the moment for Ukraine. This is one of the areas of the greatest vulnerability for Ukraine, and thus the area of greatest emphasis in these Russian targeted strikes. Now, Russian forces struck energy facilities in the south and west of Ukraine, says Euromaidan Press. 2 power workers injured in Zaporizhia. So that looks like the missile on Zaporizhia was hitting an energy plant as well there. That would be the implication from this. Attacks hit Lviv, an educational facility in Ivano-Frankivsk. Ukraine intercepted 12 out of 16 missiles there, so 4 missiles get through. And of course, all the other ordnance comes down, falls down, and does damage anyway. Sadly, the Ministry of Internal Affairs in the Russian city of Rostov is no longer violently exploding, says Jay in Kyiv. Okay, so yesterday this is nothing that's happened last night, but there was just lots of reports of the city of Rostov, the Ministry of Internal Affairs being hit. Huge fires there. Lots of evidence of some significant activity in Rostov, causing an awful lot of smoke. I don't know, when you have that much smoke and you're thinking Ministry of Internal Affairs, like that kind of very dark, dense smoke, you wonder what was actually at that target point. Now, Anton Gerashchenko says Russian media reports I knew that would happen. Always comes back on. Russian media report that a supply warehouse of the Russian Internal Ministry is on fire in Rostov-on-Don, so he's reporting that as well. Yeah. Okay, moving on. So yesterday, a little earlier this evening, authorities yesterday evening in Odessa confirmed no one was hurt in this explosion. A recreation centre was reportedly damaged and a grass fire started as a missile hit the south of Odessa. So still other missiles going both ways throughout the day yesterday, hitting both Ukraine and occupied Ukraine, the Russian side. And then I think this is from this morning, Donetsk, Bavovna, so explosions, around 20 explosions in Donetsk, which is, shows that activity is still taking place today in the daytime. Quite a lot of smoke coming up from there, indicating that, I don't know where Donetsk, I don't know if someone else is giving any more information on that. Yeah, not too sure, but yes, Donetsk seems to be under quite a bit of attention of the Ukrainians there. Okay, so moving on to other bits and pieces. Women will be trained to drive trucks and buses at the national level in Ukraine. This is exactly what I would have expected. I'm surprised it's taken this long to be so official. This is a bit like land girls in World War II. You need to, so when you're sending off all your young men to fight predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly, then you have a labour shortage in the economy, and jobs that might have traditionally been done by men need to be done still. So either you're getting in older people to work beyond retirement, or you're going to get women in to fill in for those jobs, and then you're going to have knock-on effects with care working, as in primary carers for children. So you need to consider that. But not all women are either primary carers or parents or still at parental age. So there's going to be a lot of movement of women into sectors that would traditionally have been occupied in the labour market by men. This has been announced by Deputy Minister of Infrastructure Serhiy Derkach. As of February, the shortage of public transport drivers reached 30%, and the deficit may be even greater now. For example, in Lviv, there is a significant shortage of public transport drivers due to mobilisation. So you will see also migrants coming to fill those gaps as well, and we've heard about that over the last couple of weeks. Russia continues adding barriers around the Crimean Bridge to defend against Ukraine's naval drones in the Kerch Strait. So we see just a gradual building of these barriers, these floating barriers to stop things like the Magura V5 drones from working on the Kerch Bridge. Now, going back to kind of mobilization, a new record of men trying to illegally leave Ukraine. No fewer than 47 were captured on the border today with Moldova. They were in 5 cars. Guards also arrested 7 organisers. This is a massive challenge. You're going to see this. People don't want to fight in a war, even though they fully support Ukraine and their country and winning in the war. It's a case of self-preservation. They'll have their own psychological reasons for this. You might call them cowards, or you might just try and explain why they might be doing that. Might have young families, and although running to another country when you've got young families, it's a prickly discussion to have. This is going to be a problem that it's not like this wasn't predicted, right? It happened when mobilization was announced back at the beginning of the war. You had a lot of refugees. Some of them were men, and it happened with Russia as well, and continues to happen with Russia too. So, yeah, a well-known problem, but one that the Ukrainians will have to deal with. They are dealing with it consistently. Right, George Barros from the Institute for the Study of War says, good report from the Washington Post. These reports are making it ever clearer that the White House has imposed prohibitions against Ukraine from striking Russian military targets that are not actively engaged in attacking Ukraine. So the piece from the Post, the Ukrainian officials said the United States has restricted Ukraine to firing less than 100 kilometers, or about 62 miles from the border. So you're now seeing lots of maps across Ukraine's border into Russia of 100-kilometer range and what you could hit in there. But unfortunately, things like air bases still don't seem to be allowed to be hit. Both spoke on the condition of, so you got experts speaking on the condition of anonymity because they're not authorized to speak publicly, etc., etc. But officials declined to specify the limitation, but said the Ukrainians' assertion of less than 100 kilometers was incorrect. Quote, the US has agreed to allow Ukraine to fire US-provided weapons into Russia across where Russian forces are coming to attempt to take Ukrainian territory, said the Pentagon spokesman Major Charlie Dietz. This is not about geography or a certain radius, but if Russia is attacking or about to attack from its territory into Ukraine, Ukraine has the ability to hit back against the forces that are hitting it from across the border. Of course, there's no proactivity going on here. Like, you can't stop Russians from thinking about attacking by hitting particular military strong points, It almost seems like you've got to wait for them to attack, and then that justifies being able to hit the Russians. Ukraine is also permitted to use US supplied air defense systems to strike Russian planes, quote, if they're about to fire into Ukrainian airspace. So again, this appears to say that you can't hit air bases because you can only fire at airplanes if they're about to fire into your airspace. It's ridiculous. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan emphasized a point in an interview on PBS saying, quote, this is not about geography. It's about common sense. If Russia is attacking or about to attack from its territory into Ukraine, it only makes sense to allow Ukraine to hit back against the forces that are hitting it from across the border. I guess the question is how far you can stretch about to attack. Like if you're seeing troops starting to amass in, I don't know, Rostov-on-Don, right, or Rostov Oblast, you maybe hit them and say, yeah, intelligence was saying they were about to attack. But yeah, anyway, that is from the Washington Post. Barros goes on to say, the rules of engagement for striking a Russian target essentially depends on what the military target is doing at the time. If a unit is in the rear and not attacking you now, it's off limits. When it attacks you next week, then it can be struck. It's ridiculous. So you could have struck it last week, but because the rules say you can only do it when they're moving or attacking or just about to attack, then... yeah, and they can get prepared for that. It's just, yeah, it is ridiculous. US policy still protects all major Russian military air bases, the ones that support sorties dropping salvos of Fab 500, 1,500, and reportedly now Fab 3,000 bombs. Many of these air bases are in range of ATACMS. I absolutely advocate for the striking of any military target, and I'd say that if the Ukrainians can strike things like oil refineries with their own indigenous made munitions, then cool, keep it at that. But certainly military targets with ATACMS should be fair game. Russian military targets, take out those air bases. Honestly, why restrict Ukraine from prevailing in this war when you clearly want them to prevail? It's just crazy. Right, Russian company Fours, F-O-R-E-S, announced that it will pay 15 million rubles to Russian military personnel for destroying F-15 or F-16 fighter jets provided to Ukraine, says no reports here. We've seen this before with Abrams and Bradleys and whatnot. But yeah, there's an incentive for the Russians to destroy Western jets as they come into Ukraine. Anyway, that's enough from me. Please like, subscribe and share. Really appreciate your support. Take care and speak soon. Toodle pips.